is going to be recorded. You may have noticed that you can broadcast your questions to everybody, the entire group, so that we all see the questions. That doesn't hurt because it helps me avoid having to repeat all of them. Or you can send me a message privately. Okay, so if you have a question or you are concerned that you don't want the entire group to see, I'm the only one that'll see that. Okay, I think you can also send messages to each other privately, but I'm not positive. I've muted everybody so we don't hear noises in the background from your kids, your dog, your cat, domestic disputes, whatever else might be going on. You can imagine, like right now, we have 15 people attending online, so it could get pretty hectic if we were listening in on everybody. However, if you would like to have a moment to be able to speak a question, it's just too hard to type it all in into the little chat box. You want to speak it, let me know and I can turn your speaker on for you. I can turn your speaker on so that you can speak into your microphone and we can hear you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. In this particular case, the file that I'm looking at right now has some data. It has 18 subjects with some values. I'm going to just call it, for argument's sake, I'm going to call it blood pressure, because it looks like a value that could be blood pressure, for instance. Okay, so we have 18 values called X. This column we call the variable X in this case. Yes?
Which file is this? I'm sorry.
This is number 1, descriptive statistics _ exercise 1. It's on Blackboard under the lab tab, under session 2. This is session 2, right? I'm remembering. Yes.
I was supposed to go to the meeting for session 2.
I'm sorry?
We're supposed to go to.
Oh, you just had it open. You just had the right file open.
Right, what about, do we have to go to a meeting too?
No, you don't have to go to a meeting where you can look up here.
Okay.
I want you guys to have your Excel open, so you can actually repeat what I'm doing here. Because it's kind of like riding a bicycle. I could teach you how to ride a bicycle. I could show you YouTube on how to ride a bicycle, but you're not going to learn to ride a bicycle unless you actually do it yourselves. Okay, so anyway, so this is the Excel file that we have here. Okay, so now we have 18 subjects. It goes down to 19 because the first line happens to be the variable name X. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate the mean. So we were talking about this before in Excel, and the way we do that, I'm going to click into this box. I'm going to type an equal sign. That indicates to Excel that I'm going to type a formula into that box. And you might remember that the formula for mean is actually average to Excel. I type in equals average parentheses. And once I put the parentheses in, if that function actually exists, it'll start to prompt me on what it wants next. And it actually wants the actual values. So now the actual values are in cell A2 through A19, 18 values. And I can either type in A2 colon A19, or I can just click into the A2, drag down, and it'll fill those values in for me. Okay, I'm going to avoid letting go until I have them all in there. And close parentheses. And the mean happens to be 99.94. Yes?
So when I tried to do that with the dragging, it just says name.
Maybe you don't have the variable name in right. In other words, you got to make sure that you have, like, for instance, I click in here, equals, average, and I go into parentheses, and now it's ready to input the values. Okay, probably you didn't get the parentheses in there and it wasn't ready yet. Yeah, it kind of prompts you. Now I'm ready. Go ahead, give me the values now. Okay, good. So in case you guys at home had that same issue, now you have that cleared up for you as well. Okay, so let me just show you what happened there, just because I know some of you will have that problem. If you have average, like for instance, I didn't put the if I have average, it doesn't do anything because it doesn't know it's a function. If I type in average, but it's not ready yet to accept it, it doesn't know what to do with that. I didn't give it the range of values as necessary, and that's the kind of error that you get. Okay, so our mean is roughly 100, 99.94. Now you'll notice that there's a lot of extra. I didn't intend for this to happen, but I'm glad it did, kind of. There's a lot of extra decimal places here that I don't really need. So I'm going to highlight this column B. I can just go up to B and highlight that entire column. Then I'm going to go up to Format. Now this is going to look a little bit different, somewhat different on Excel versions of PC versions of Excel and Mac versions of Excel. On the PC versions of Excel, you're going to have formatting in the way of a ribbon in a ribbon rather than necessarily on these drop menus. They kind of make this Mac friendly in the Mac versions. Let me see if I can't find it here myself in this version. Let's see. You can also right click. Yeah, I'll do that. Right click and format cells. That works in both versions. Okay. On the Mac, of course, right click if you only have one button mouse is control click. So I'm going to say format cells. Box comes up and I'm going to tell it, let's format it as a number. It's a number. And I'm going to say I don't want any more than one decimal place being displayed. Whoops. Go down to 1. Click OK. So now if I look at that, everything in that column is going to have a single decimal place. But notice this is pretty cool. If I click in there though, right? Well, you won't see it here because it's a calculation. If I click into any other box where it's an actual number that's calculated, Excel actually remembers in that cell all of the decimal places. It's only displaying the to one decimal place, but it doesn't lose the information. Yes?
But then you double click it?
I'm sorry.
It shows it up in the bar.
Oh, if you do, yeah. Yeah, well, actually, on mine it's showing the calculation rather than number. Right.
If you just type in like 12 point.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yep.
The place that you see it is up in that top.
Yep. Yeah, for instance, I'll do that. 12 point, I'm going to put in a few numbers. It converts it to a single decimal point, but it retains that information. So when you round stuff on Excel, in a cell in Excel, you ask it to only display a certain number of decimal places, it doesn't lose the information, it just displays it differently. Okay, so that's the mean. Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt you because I didn't see format on the top here on the tabs. And
on the Mac version, it's up here.
okay.
On your version, it's in the actual ribbon that goes across here. There's a ribbon here. Like this ribbon has all sorts of information about the font and so on and so forth. It's buried in here somewhere. I'm not sure which one it is, right? But if you just if I highlight the whole row or any individual cell for that matter, and I control click or right click on it, one of the options I'm going to have is to format that cell here. Format cells, like for instance, the entire row. Okay, so at any rate, that's what the mean is. The count happens to be just the number of subjects, right? And I can see that there's 18 subjects here, but instead of typing that in, I'm actually going to use that function, count. Now there's several functions count. There's count, count if, and count ifs. Count just counts the number of values that are not empty in the number of cells that you display. And I'm going to use count, parentheses. It's ready to accept a range of values. I'm going to go from that 99, the first value, down to the last value. And in fact, there's 18 people in there. I could have calculated the mean by just taking the sum of this column and dividing it by count n, or the total number of values. Okay? I'll slow down a little bit every once in a while, make sure you guys are keeping up. Okay, so there's also count if and count ifs. I'm going to stay away from them today. If you saw the tutorial that Professor Rendina did on Thursday this past week, he uses, number one, uses a PC. So if you guys are having trouble figuring out which way to do it for a PC versus a Mac or something like that, it's good to take a look at that. You can actually scrub through these things and take a look through those tutorials, as well. There's count. He also goes over how to use count if and count ifs and so on. Count if is you can give a condition. If the number is less than 100, count it, but don't count it if it's more than 100. That's count if, and you can put in that condition in the count if, and so on and so forth. And yeah, you can actually have several conditions. He does this with male and female and so on and so forth. It actually differentiates the number of values within a range of numbers that way. I'm going to avoid that because it gets a little confusing with a big group right now. I want to concentrate on the statistics rather than on that specific function. Okay, so now I got the mean here, right? Well, now I'm going to say that, it's very nice to have the mean, right? But I also want to get some other information about this. For instance, what about the minimum? What's the minimum here? I want to take a look at what the range is. Remember, the range was the maximum minus the minimum. Well, in fact, we have a function, min, parentheses, for the minimum, and we can ask Excel to give us the minimum value. Going to do exactly the same thing, hit enter, and the minimum value happens to be 88. The maximum value is equal to max, interestingly enough, parentheses, and I'm going to highlight all these. And again, I could just type them in again if I wanted to. The maximum was 114, and the range, guys, remember what the range was? The maximum minus the minimum. Bingo. The range is 26.
Wait, can you do that again?
Sure.
Or, oh, okay, got it.
Okay. I got this one by typing in, I'm going to do it again. I got this one by typing in equals max parentheses. Now it's ready to receive the range of numbers that I got to work with. I'm going to click in here and drag down, hit enter. Normally I'd hit the close parentheses. I happen to know it'll work on here without doing that in this particular function. And if I want the range, it's equal to the maximum, which is 114, minus the minimum, which is 88. I could have typed in 114 minus 88, but why bother to do that? It just introduces a chance for me to do a typo, to make a mistake, right? So it's a lot better to point at the cell you want to reference than it is to actually try and copy the data. Okay, so now the other thing that we were interested in, I didn't put it down here for some reason. I missed it. I might be interested in knowing what the median is. I'm going to add that here, median. Okay, somehow or other I missed that. I'm also interested maybe in the mode. Okay, so what's the median? The median is the middle value, correct? Everybody agree with that? Okay, so I'm going to type in here median, and in fact there is a function, parentheses, it's ready for me to give it a range of numbers, and we know that's going to be A2 through A19 again. Hit enter, and the median is 100. Notice something here, the median is very close to what my mean was. Starting to sound like this might be a normal distribution, right? We expect in a normal distribution that the median and the mean are pretty close, suggesting that, maybe this distribution is not very skewed, that there's not somebody in here that has a blood pressure of 200 that's pulling the mean value way far away from the median value, or someone with a very low blood pressure. Yes, the problem there?
Yeah,
I'll give you a chance to catch up if you need it, yeah.
No, I'm still having the name issue, but I made sure to put the parentheses.
Oh, did it start to prompt you for the range?
Yeah, and then I grabbed all of the data,
Uh-huh.
closed
And
parentheses, and pressed enter.
What is it? Click in there and read to me what it says.
It just says invalid name error.
Oh, no. Click in there and up in the formula bar, what does it say?
Okay, I see. Got it. Okay.
Up.
I think I got it now. Okay. Now
Okay, good. All right. Yes.
Your function, basically, any function when you're doing is always governed. You have to have that parentheses to make that little blue.
Exactly.
Green down, right?
To be ready for you to put in the target parameters, like with the range of numbers or the number you wanted to do the analysis on.
But once you select that range too, and you let go of it, you have to hit the enter too.
If you want to be careful, you hit the parentheses and then you want to close the parentheses, hit enter.
Okay.
But most of the time it'll work without, you'll get away with it. Yeah.
Boom, hit enter, it'll give
Yeah,
it.
and it'll do it. Okay, all right. So now the median is 100. The median is the middle value, right? Okay, so now I'm going to do something a little bit different here. I'm going to click into that 99, and I'm going to drag down until all of these numbers are highlighted. Okay, then I'm going to go up to either, if you're on a PC, and up here you may see a little window for sort. Like for instance, let's see where, I don't have it on here. Over the right side, you guys see it? Insert, delete. You have it because you're on the PC. Oh, here it is up here for me. Okay, like I said, a little bit different on the Mac because they try and make it a little bit more Mac-like. I can click on that and ask it to sort this data, to put the numbers in order. Now, you have to be a little bit careful because if number 4, for instance, that's displayed here, is a particular subject, and that happens to be his blood pressure, and next is going to be his weight and his BMI and so on and so forth, you want to make sure it sorts all the way across. So that you want to make sure that all of these are highlighted. In fact, Excel typically will warn you so that when you sort on the blood pressure, for instance, on that first column, that all of the other columns come with it, and it doesn't separate the data out. So, in fact, there's nothing in here, so I don't really have to do that, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to ask it to sort this. And I always use the drop menus myself. I'm just old, and I picked up all these bad habits over the years, but somewhere in here I lost it again. There is a sort. Where is it? You see it?
Right there.
Oh, here it's up here again. Yeah, it's up here again. I'm going to sort these ascending, for instance. Okay, that puts the lowest number at the top, and the highest number at the bottom. Now, since these were all highlighted, it would have followed. All the other columns would have followed, but they're empty anyway. So, in fact, I can check right now. Oh, indeed, the minimum is 88. Indeed, the maximum is 114. And what about the median? Well, that's the middle value, right? Well, the middle value, I have 18 values. There is no middle value, right? There's nine lower values, 9 upper values for 18, right? So it's going to be, the median is going to be halfway between, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's going to be halfway between the 9th value and the 10th value, between 99 and 101, and the average of those two numbers is 100. Yes?
This is a hypothetical. So if you're bar 2 going down, bar B going down, let's say that these numbers were the blood pressure of people after they took a concentration, a percent concentration of a fluid.
Yep.
And so in bar B, you had the different percentage concentration.
Yeah, that would go with them.
And you did the sort.
Yes.
It would still use the A as the sorting.
You could use anything you wanted to sort. If these might have been they could have been first name, last name, age. You could sort it on whatever you want to sort. It's just you got to highlight all 4 rows so that you don't separate. You don't, like, in other words, if you sort only the first row and you don't sort the third, fourth of column rather, you don't sort the second, third, and fourth, what will happen is the 88 will be pulled away from the subject that it really represents.
Right, but what if the B was also numbers?
It wouldn't matter. In other words, you can tell it to sort on one variable. For instance, I can go up here and I'm going to highlight this. And if I want to go into the drop menus, it'll give me a little bit more detail. I could sort on the first value. I could then tell it I also want, as a secondary sort, to sort it on the next value, and this another, and then do a sort, and so on. So I can do multiple variable sorts if I want to, or just one. Okay, so the median is 100 because it's the average of the 2 middle values. If there were 19 people in this study, it would have just been the 10th person, right? There's an odd number of people, makes it easier. Okay, let's do mode equals. Let's check it out, see if there's a mode variable, in fact there is. And let's see. And the mode is 104. Okay, if you notice, there were 300 people whose values were 104. Yes?
When I type in mode, I get mode multi or mode single?
Just type mode in parentheses. Yeah. To hope there are several functions. A lot of these functions have several options that you have on the way you use them. For instance, when I did count, you might have seen there was count if, count ifs, count dot something or other. You'll see a number of these things. The simplest form of it is usually just a command with a parentheses. Okay, so let me just see what I get when I do this. I'm sorry, what did we just do? Mode, parentheses. Now I only get the one choice on mine. Oh, no, I do. I get others too. Multiple. If you really want to know what those are, you can actually go into this function, click on that function bar, and you can type in there mode and take a look at all the different mode functions that are available and actually click into it and get a description of what that's for. And open this up. There's no help available for this. Normally you click on that, you get some help on it. Excel does not recognize this function, syntax, I don't know why it's saying that, but you get the idea. Okay, there are other forms of the function and if you go into that function list, you can usually get some feedback on it. Plus, if you go, oh, you know what happened? I didn't complete typing it in over there. That's why it gave me that error. Let me try this again. F of X, mode. And let's see what this says. See if it'll give me a Oh, there it goes. It gives me on that particular variant of the command, it gives me an explanation of what it's for, how to work it, and so on and so forth. Okay, we're not using that. We're just interested in the pure mode. Okay, and the mode happened to be 104. What's the mode? It's the most frequent value, the one with the largest frequency, the value that the most people have. And I can see that's 104 here. There's no other single value that 3 people have. There's 93, there's 2 of those. There's 2 people with blood pressures or whatever this is of 109 and so on and so forth. So the mode is the most, 104 is the one that occurs the most frequently. Okay, so next thing I'm going to look at is, these for the most part are measures of where the center is and some basic look at how spread out this distribution is, how spread out this sample is. Remember, sample always meant to represent the population. Most of the time we really don't have an opportunity to work with the entire population, so this sample is our window on the population. So mean, median, mode, so on and so forth, they're measures of the central tendency. Where is the middle of this population or this sample, and by inference, the middle of the population. Okay. Now, we're also interested in how variable the values are within this population. It's of interest to us to know, for instance, well, if the average blood pressure is 100, as it seems like here, the median and the mode pretty much look like 100, is the variability within this population. We have a lot of people between 80 and 120, or 60 and 140, or so on and so forth. We want to get a handle on how spread out these values are, because that may be of some importance to us. And so it will be of some importance to us. So we're going to calculate something now, which is an estimate of the variability in this population or in this sample, and by inference the population. Well, one way I might do that is by taking the mean, which is 99.9, and I'm going to find the difference between each one of the individual values and the mean. If there's a lot of variability, those differences are going to be big. If there's very little variability, the difference between the mean and each value is going to be small. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. X bar, I just wrote that in there because what I really mean to put is X with a bar over the top, which represents the average of the sample. Okay, so the average of the sample is equal to 99.9. Now I could type in 99.9 and copy it down, except I don't like doing that because you know how it is with the typing things. You can get it wrong a lot of times. So I'm going to put an equal sign, and I'm going to click into that box 99.9, and sure enough, there's 99.9 in there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, as we've done before, I'm going to click in there. I'm going to drag this down to here, and I'm going to ask it to fill that value down. Well, I got a problem there. I got kind of odd results there. Anybody know why that happened? Because when I copy a formula down, if I copy a number down, I'm going to put the number 99.9 in here, and I'm going to drag that down. I'm going to drag that down. I'm going to say fill down. Yeah, that fill command on the PC is on the right-hand side. Fill down works fine. But when I copy the formula down, let me see what happened. Well, over here is equal to B21, which is the value that I was interested in. Then it says B22, B23, B24. It thinks you want to repeat that formula based on the adjoining rows. So I need to tell it, hey, listen, don't copy down that formula and adjust it as you go down. I want you to keep that formula, keep that cell static. I don't want it to change. Okay, well, the way we do that, this is called relative addressing. Okay, when you copy a formula down and say you're taking row A and multiplying by row B to get row C, like units, time cost, and so on and so forth. That's called relative addressing. As you copy it down, indeed, it'll take row B's quantity times row B's cost and calculate the value for that, and it'll take C's and D's. We want that in most cases, relative addressing. Well, in this case, we don't want it. We want absolute addressing. And the way we tell it to stay with that B21 and copy it down is we put a $sign in front of the B and a $sign in front of the 21. That tells it that, sure enough, we want you to copy into that cell the value that's in B21, but now when I copy it down, it knows stick with that value. Don't use relative addressing. Okay, and I'm going to say fill down. And we're going to get all 99s in there instead.
What was that?
Okay?
No, can you do that one more time?
Okay, hang on a second. Let me give you guys a minute to try it yourself. Okay? How many of you guys got it to work? Okay. How many of you guys, you had some problem with it, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go back in there. I'm going to click into that first box. And instead of having it equals B21, I'm going to put a $ in front of the B
Okay.
and a $ in front of the 21. So it's $B, $21. Okay, now I'm going to copy it. I'm going to highlight the whole thing down to the B19, and I'm going to say fill down. And now it's going to copy down 99.9 into every box. And if I click into any of these boxes, they're all going to say B21, right? That's absolute addressing. Okay, makes sense?
Not quite yet. I'm still on trying to figure out how to calculate X bar.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
no problem. Okay, so at any rate, so now I've copied this value into all of these boxes. If you're having trouble with it for now, you can just type in 99.9 and just copy the number down. Okay? Although it won't be exactly the same because, remember, we hid some of those decimal places. Okay, anybody there, anybody here, tell me, I cheated a little bit there. I told you need to put the $ in both the B and the in front of the B and the 21. Do I really need both of those $? Any opinions? I didn't really need the one in front of the B because it's in the same column anyway. It would have copied the same column down. I only really needed it in front of the 21 so it wouldn't advance row by row by row. But that's okay. You can put it in front of both anyway. Let me click in there. You see it there? Unfortunately, I can't make that. Let me see if I can't. Nah, it won't let me get away with it. Okay, let me see how those guys at home are doing. How are you guys doing at home? Okay, good. All right, good. See, they're doing better at home because they have a cocktail. It's helping them out. They're relaxing them a little bit.
Did you have a fill? Because I'm doing exactly what you're doing, but mine wouldn't copy.
I'll tell you what. Let me move on, and then we're going to take a short break, and I'm going to walk around, make sure everybody's caught up when we get done with this particular spreadsheet. In the meantime, what you can do is just so you can keep up, just type in 99.9 in that first box, and then copy it down. So you have 99.9 in every box. In other words, highlight them all and say fill down. Okay. Okay. I'm going to wait for a moment. Okay. If you guys have fallen behind here a little bit, keep an eye on what I'm doing, and then we'll take a short break. I'll make sure that you guys are caught up. Okay. Okay. So now we want to see the variability that we're looking for a measure of the variability. So one way to measure the variability is see how much different each of these values is than the mean. So I'm going to say, x minus x bar. X bar is the mean. X minus x bar. X is each individual value. So I'm going to say in this box, I'm going to put a formula here that says is equal to 88 minus 99.9. X minus x bar. In this case, it happens to be 11.9. Right? So I'm going to repeat that for each cell. So I'm going to click in here and drag down till I'm down here, and I'm going to click into fill. Again, on the PC, it's on the right-hand side. Fill down. It's going to copy that formula all the way down for each row. The next 89 minus 99.9 is minus 10.9. And 106 minus 99.9 is 6.1, and so on and so forth. So I'm finding all of the differences between each individual value and the mean. So if they're very variable, the values are very much different than the mean, right? Those numbers are going to be big. Okay, so now as a measure of the variability, I'm going to measure all of those differences. Equals the sum of all of these differences. Anybody want to hazard a guess what I might get? Bingo. 0. That's not going to help me much, right? Because they all cancel out. That's what the mean is. Half of them are more above, half of them are below. by roughly, by mathematically the same amount, by geometrically the same amount. So it adds up to 0. So I can't add them up that way. I can either use a positive. How am I going to get these all to be the same value? Well, I can use positive value, which is a possibility, or I can just square them. And that's what I'm going to do. The next column is going to be the value minus the mean squared. So it's going to be equal to 11 minus 11.9 times itself. I'm just going to hit asterisk. So it's C2 asterisk C2, just that value times itself. And it comes out to 142 points, whatever. Now, the thing here is that all these, I'm going to copy that down, do the same thing. And I'm going to fill down that formula. And it's going to do it for each one of these things, except this time now, when I add up all these different squares of the differences between the mean and each individual value, right? When I add them all up, they're going to be a positive number. They're going to be an actual number now because they're not going to cancel out. They're all positive numbers. Anytime you multiply a negative times a negative or a positive times positive, it's going to be yeah, I almost got away with that. I almost made a mistake there. Sum, parentheses, and I'm going to highlight all these. I'm going to add them all up. And the sum, and the sum of all of these differences, the squares of all of the differences between the values and the means, the sum of them is 892, as it happens. Okay? Now, there's a name for that. That's the sum of the squares of the differences. Isn't that exactly what we did? We took the differences between each value and the mean, we squared it, and we took the sum of all the differences. That sum of differences is the first term that we kind of work with when we're talking about variability in samples. Okay, sit down. Yes?
Just to review, the difference of the difference is the difference between the value and the mean?
Right. Each line represents here x minus x bar. Each one of those represents the difference between the value, that particular value, and the mean for the entire group. And if there was a lot of variability, like for instance, instead of the range being from 88 to 114, the range had been from 60 to 180, right? These numbers, those differences would have been bigger, and the squares would have been bigger, and the sum of the squares of the differences would be a bigger number, right? So the size of that number gives us our first look at how variable these numbers are, how spread out these numbers are from the mean.
What I'm doing, I got up there, but then I keep getting, as I go on, I keep chomping off numbers. I keep getting value as the last variable, even though I have the formula correct. I'm getting.
Okay, I'll take a look over your shoulder. Like I said, I'm gonna take a break when I'm done with this. I'm gonna look over your shoulders. Okay. Okay. So I'm calling that the sum of the squares of the differences. So now I'm going to take that number. Remember, that sum of squares, that represents the differences, the sum of the squares of the differences for 18 numbers, right? So I'm going to do the same kind of thing I did with the average. I'm going to average those differences. I'm going to say that I'm going to take that number, 892, and divide it by, I'm not going to divide it by 18. I'm going to divide it by 18 minus 1. We just talked about there's a rationale for doing this. For the moment, take my word for it so we can work through this. Yes? Hang on a second. What I did was I went in here and I said equals, and I was going to square. There's a couple of ways. One way you can indicate square to Excel is you can put in a value and then put an up caret and then a number after it for a 2. That'll square it. The other way you can do it is to just say what's the value in C2 asterisk times the value in C2, right? That's a simple way to do it. Okay, do it either way. So now I'm going to calculate the variance. Variance is equal to 892 divided by. Now I'm going to use that trick that we talked about in lecture. Instead of dividing it by 18, I'm going to divide it by 17 degrees of freedom instead of the average, the number of the sample size. So that's going to be equal to 52. We're going to give that a special name. That's unique to this sample. We're going to call that the variance. So we have the sum of squares. We divide it, the sum of the squares of the differences, the sum of squares. We divide that by n minus 1. That gives us the variance. And now, which kind of puts it into a little bit more of a rational range, because now it's the amount of variance per individual in that, rather than just everybody add it all together, kind of an average of it. Now, the other problem I have is we made this number much bigger than the real variability between the individuals by squaring it. So now I'm just gonna take the square root of this value to bring us back into the range of numbers that we're really working with. So I'm gonna call this equals square root. There's a value square root, SQRT parentheses. You don't have to type the whole word out. I'm just gonna click on that cell with the 52, close parentheses, and hit enter. And the square root of that is 7.24. That's kind of now in the range of numbers that we're dealing with. Okay, I'm going to call that something called the standard deviation. The standard deviation is going to be enormously useful to us going forward. It's an important number. That's really the number that we're going to use to describe the variability of this sample, and by inference, the variability of the population. Okay, that number, had we had a sample of people where the values were much more variable, that number would have come out to be a bigger number. Had the numbers been tighter, like a range of say 95 to 105, instead of 88 to 114, that number would have come out to be smaller. Everybody appreciate why that happens? Because once we start, the difference between the mean, right at our start, the difference between the mean and each individual value is going to be smaller. So the square is going to be smaller, sum of squares is going to be smaller, the variance is going to be smaller, the standard deviation is going to be smaller. Kind of a roundabout way of doing this, right? Are you going to do this every time? No, you're not going to do this every time. What you're going to do is you're going to say, gee, I have to calculate the standard deviation. Equals STDEV parentheses. There's a function for standard deviation. And I'm just going to highlight all those numbers. And I'm going to cross my fingers. And I got the same value. Oh, I'm so glad. Right? Until it actually works, I don't take it for granted. Right? I used a function called STDEV parentheses. STDEV, standard deviation, STDEV, equal signs first, STDEV, and just highlighted those, either typed in the range of cells, A2 through A19. Now, why didn't I just do that right off the bat? Because if I did that right off the bat, half of you people would not know how the hell you get the standard deviation. You would think you get it by typing standard deviation to Excel. This is an actual calculation. This is something that's organic to the numbers in the sample, right? So now you know where that number comes. You know where the number sum of squares comes from when you see it again. You know where the number variance comes from when you see it again. Now you know where the number standard deviation comes from when you see it again. Okay? I'm going to take, because I can see some of you guys are struggling with Excel a little bit. I'm going to take a 5-minute break from this. I'm going to look at the questions online, see if there's any questions online. We'll turn the lights off for a minute. I'm going to take 5 minutes so we can run around, make sure everybody is on the same page. Okay? In the meantime, those of you that are ready might open that exercise number 2 in Excel and start tinkering with it, or exercise number 3. Okay? Hang on, guys, online. Okay.